Hello, everyone. Um, I'm delighted today to be joined by Joy Davis. Joy Davis is Managing Director, Member Products for the American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists, and she is joined by her colleague, Dr. Tina Morris, who is Executive Director at the Society. And I was very inspired by a recent article that I read from Joy and Tina that was extremely forthright and positive about the world in which us professional conference organizers and in-house organizers are currently operating. What particularly inspired me, Joy, and was really a leaf out of my own book, was that we all became inventors, change managers. I know that there were a lot of people that were having those conversations. How was it for you?
Well, in the United States, we had our first experience with COVID-19 and closing down in March. And for AAPS, the organization that I work for, that meant we had to move 3 meetings. We had to figure out what to do with them very quickly. And we could cancel one because there wasn't really anyone registered, but the others weren't in that position. We would have had to have told scientists not to get together and talk. And for us, working with pharmaceutical scientists, in the case of a pandemic, this is our time. We're supposed to bring the scientists together to talk about everything. We make it go faster. They're brilliant. They're the ones who are finding the therapies and advancing the cures and all of that, but we're the people that help them do it faster and more effectively because we get them together to talk. And there was a real moment discussing that in the spring. I think Tina remembers that. And we made the commitment that no, we were going to get them together no matter what. So we were going to figure this out because that's what we're here to do. And I was talking to some other associations in the US. I'm on a council with the American Society of Association Executives.
Yeah.
And a couple of us were having that conversation, like our job right now is to help people do what they need to do because the whole country needs us to do it. And in our case, we're global. So our pharmaceutical scientists are everywhere and they need us right now. Tina, do you remember that?
I do, yeah, and it was an interesting time also because it was actually the time I started as the executive director at AAPS, and we had a couple of workshops planned that spring, and actually one of my first conversations with our volunteers and our volunteer leaders was the conversation that for one particular workshop that they were either going to do it virtually or they were not going to do it at all, and how sad and how difficult it would be if that workshop didn't happen at all, because it's important content. And but it was at the time, I think, it was still a very difficult conversation because even people in our field were holding that thought that, oh, this is all going to be over in a few months, and then we can all get back together and everything will go back to normal. And we had, at that time, we already had, I would say, a very informed concern that this was not going to be the case. And so we planned, and we started to plan very deliberately to think through the different scenarios that might unfold throughout the year. But what we also encountered during those initial conversations is that no matter what field people work in, when it comes to interactions at conferences and the content exchange, some people face, I would say, that the challenge to imagine things have to be different. And so getting our members and our volunteer leaders across that bridge to say, the meeting is going to be different, but it's going to be still a great meeting. And that was that was from the very beginning. It was clear that for some people that is easier than for others, and to bring everybody along and get them to think differently about events was the most interesting journey. And I think that's also sort of where I would say the core of that article originated, because of that experience that started literally in March, early April.
That's fantastic. And I so resonate with that reticence on behalf of those that, you know, have had large congresses, small congresses on the ground for many, many years. And the role that we have as change makers, you know, I am committed to that. But I did see that in a way, COVID was almost a fast forward, an engine that changed us quicker. We were already on the journey. Associations are already, you know, they were looking at drop off. They were looking at decline. They weren't getting the numbers necessarily at Congress. That actually our exploration, our trailblazing into the virtual space has actually been helpful in driving engagement tactics, the change that perhaps those of us like Joy and I that are, you know, working with associations to look at what the product range is, how to get better traction with members, and that's evolution, has actually helped us in how we are supporting associations engage their communities. I mean, do you feel the same, Joy, Tina, about that as me, that we were actually already on a journey and this has propelled us forward?
AAPS was already on a very particular journey. We relaunched we introduced an entirely new annual meeting in 2018. And we were both tracking what was going on with our new meeting and changing things, continuing to change things, because we were absolutely focused on that, get the scientists together to talk, and what do scientists really want in this meeting? And anything that isn't really what they want, we don't really want to do. And that actually worked to our advantage, because we understood our meeting and our members much more deeply, I think, than some of the organizations I've run into who seem to be less ready to reimagine things because they hadn't laid the groundwork. And I use the phrase reimagine intentionally because Tina's favorite word from this summer was imagine, wasn't it, Tina?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, as I said, that conversation sort of started when, you know, we had some discussions among staff, and, you know, sometimes, you know, one of us would say, I don't understand why people don't get that. And I would say, well, you know, it's a lack of imagination. Some people can't or won't imagine things differently. And I think an important component that we did have going for us, though, and that we do have going for us as an association, and I think that became a very critical conversation point with our volunteers and our members, was to remind them what the society was there for to begin with. And we are very fortunate that our core mission and our core business is very content focused. And we were able to frame a lot of our conversations around, look, the science is there. The content is there. When we talked to the scientific programming committee for the meeting early on and said, you know, the format we're going to reimagine, but you are in charge of the content, so go ahead with the content. Plan the content and don't worry about how it's going to be delivered. That's our job. We may ask for your help later on as we shuffle things around and, you know, have debates about how things would, you know, line up in the programming grid. But your primary task is the same as every year, to come up with the best possible speakers, the best possible topics, And that is a huge advantage. And as Joy mentioned, if anything, our particular area of science is more relevant than ever. And we were able to also really emphasize and say, this is important content. The communication, the conversation between the pharmaceutical scientists is more important than ever. So we enable that. And we have to find new ways of enabling that. I think that really was very important. It helped us along the way to have that conversation with our members and to really reshape and reimagine how we would do business. And I think, conversely, maybe some organizations were thrown back into sort of what I would say a little bit of an existential crisis in this situation, because they had to still go through, as Joy mentioned, what we had gone through before. Why are we having this meeting, right? Why are we having, like, for the annual meeting, why are we bringing people together? And it really paid off that the AAPS team had led everybody through significant change, I would say since 2017 or before, made changes that were really fundamental changes that now paid off. I think, just things like digital posters. We already had those. Our members knew that posters were going to be digital. Other changes, we already had online communities, and from the uptick in activity in those communities, we see that those became particularly important this past year, or since this past year, to continue to have those conversations. But I think in other organizations, it really threw people back to first principles and say, why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And I think some people found out the hard way that just transferring one-to-one what happens in person online just does not work.
No, square hole and round peg.
Yeah.
And I know from some societies here in the UK are finding, the ones that resisted change are now deep into reserves. They're looking at how long their lifespan is. Mm-hmm. And, we may not be able to rescue them all. But now you have a team of innovators, builders, creators on your hands, these wonderful scientists. I imagine they're just at base camp 1 of Everest, aren't they? What else are you changing up as we head into 2021?
Well, the thing we've been watching the most closely is, well, I think Tina agrees with me. We don't think the world will go back to looking like what it looked like in 2019. So what's going to change? We are looking at our exhibitors, our partners who are in love with all the data you can find online.
Yep.
Our younger members are networking with intentionality, and they really know how to use online tools. We're looking at growth in our virtual catalog because there are people who really want the programming available later. We have always been known for our content, and this has really made that clear. Tina, is there other stuff you can think of right off the top of your head?
I think those are some key things. I think we were really fortunate that I think some of our key volunteers, they went out there, they attended other events and said, oh, this was great, this worked really well, and we learned, we learned as we went. We were fortunate, I would say, that our biggest event of the year was later in 2020, and we were able to get our feet wet on some smaller events, some workshops, and some webinars. And we were already doing webinars, but not at that scale. The other thing I would say is that we really learned how the dynamic changes in how people participate. We took a workshop, we do custom e-learning, and we did a custom workshop for a particular client, which was had meant to be face-to-face. For 50 to 100 people at a location, at their location, at one of their manufacturing sites. And it became a global online event with over 800 registrants across 8 sites for that particular company. And we utilized our Q&A tool, and we opened a custom community and for that particular event, so that even though people were learning self-paced, they could then dialogue online with the speakers, and then we had prearranged Q&A sessions.
Yep.
And so we got really creative with the format, and the organizers who had requested us to prepare this workshop were surprised by the amount of participation they got from across the company, and that sort of ended up driving, sort of in progress creative changes that we were doing to accommodate a completely different audience format. And I have to say, I'm very grateful and proud of the AAPS team, because everybody kind of just rolled with it and said, okay, oh wow, there's now 700 people. What are we going to do? And how are we going to organize that? And it requires a lot of flexibility, and we're fortunate that I think our team is really nimble, and everybody talks about stuff as it happens every day, but it requires a completely different way of working. If people are expecting that to put on the same show they've put on for the last 10 years, that's not going to work. You've got to really be ready to do something different every day, and it's very, very dynamic right now, I would say, because the tools change also every week, and we get emails from our members and say, hey, I participated in this meeting. They have this fantastic networking tool. We found a great networking tool for our mentor breakfast at PharmSci 360, our conference, and immediately everybody's mind was going, oh, think about what we could do with that. That worked so well. People loved it. And so it really requires a lot of sort of on your feet flexibility, and it's definitely a very dynamic and interesting time. It's not for everybody, but if you're willing to take the leap, it's actually a very exciting time as well.
Well, it's so exciting and enjoyable to listen to both of your enthusiasm. There's no such thing as a bad idea. And I think we're all still very much, we've got a year's worth of experience of being inventors. And I'm sure we will learn much more, but I think, the journey of innovation and creativity and new ways of engaging our audiences is going to continue long into 2021. And I thank you very much indeed for sharing your insights with us today. I know our members will be enthused by your energy and your ideas, and thank you so much to both of you for your thoughts this afternoon. Thank you.